In our current society's culture of achieve, get to the result, it is so easy to forget that life is a journey, and in every moment you are practicing. And so in today's Mindful Moments with Jonathan Duggar, we want to talk a little bit more about what mindfulness is not, where it belongs in your life, and a lot of the misconceptions about mindfulness that make it seem a little like it is for the elite, or it's a luxury, that it isn't something that's essential. And so we want to dispel some of those myths today. So let's dive in. Hey, you leader, entrepreneur, business owner, solopreneur, whatever you call yourself, we know you're a visionary business builder, wealth seeker looking to combine a passion for doing good with leading consciously. It's time to shift from a traditional focus of pure wealth accumulation to one that integrates well-being and fulfillment. You're here for a purpose, and it's time to shine your light. So here we go. Welcome back to the Conscious Edge podcast. I'm your host, Alecia St. Germain, founder of the Conscious Edge, where I help women entrepreneurs expand their capacity emotionally, energetically, financially, so business becomes sustainable and life is deeply fulfilling. Jonathan Duggar.
Hey, everybody.
You have a big announcement. He's like, I do.
Sorry, your picture just froze. We're stirring up some things.
You have a big announcement that you're kind of bringing more mindfulness out into the world with your consulting.
Yeah. And that's actually a good segue to the subject area, because let me just
say the announcement, like what I'm doing.
Okay. So I am taking my consulting company that I have had in place for 25 years in some form or fashion in the direction of being centered around implementing mindful process in everything that we do, in personal lives, in our small businesses, and in corporate settings. So I am rolling out my company, Mindful Rise Consulting, mindfulriseconsulting.com. Over the next few months, I have a mutual friend of ours, Miss Sarah, that is helping me with the rebranding process and website and some of the copy.
Putting the tactics around the practice, right? And the mission.
Exactly. So you may ask, why am I doing this now?
Yeah.
If I've had something that's worked for me in the past. And why change it now? Especially getting long in the tooth, up there in years, all those things.
So Jonathan, why now? Why actually make this very put your flag in the sand kind of thing and redoing something that has worked for you for so many years?
So in reality, I'm changing some language, but not changing approach that much, because I've always done this in some capacity that's mindful related. But in the past, especially in corporate settings, anytime you started using language that had connotation that it was very psychological based, had an emotional or a compassion base to it, came from the area of wellness or spiritualism, or if you put any kind of words that were attached to that, whether right or wrong in terms of actual definition, it did not open doors. It closed them, in my experience at least. And I know that's true for others as well. So in corporate consulting, a lot of us that were kind of came from this framework, we would posture in a way that we're doing what we do and how we do it, but we're saying it different ways. So instead of me telling an executive that their team really needs to practice a mindful approach to strategic planning, I would say, we need to implement a process that looks at everyone's individual skill sets and what they bring to the table in a way that those gifts and those skills are appreciated in the individual, or your team will never be cohesive. So there's my corporate speak that I used to say, and now I'm going to say it. Now I'll say, we're going to take a mindful approach and remove judgment as to who's right or wrong and look at what actually is the most effective in this particular situation. I might say that. So
you're
I just pulled that out of
becoming
me,
your most authentic self.
Yes.
That's super exciting, first of all. And one of the things, let me say this first. If you're new here, before we get into this, if you're new here, we want to say welcome. We're so delighted that you're here. And this podcast has been so much fun to produce because it's allowed us to explore so many different facets of what it means to be a business owner. Personal things that we go through in taking care of our bodies, the business strategy side of things with our monthly money talks with Zen Jen and many of the guests that come, being able to have these mindfulness talks, and then you and I kind of riffing on emotional intelligence and different aspects of capacity and what it means to be a leader. And it's been so fun to just explore everything over 100 episodes now. And so it is like, I saw our podcast producer put on the 100th episode, which is just 2 episodes ago. Congratulations on your milestone. It was really sweet. And so it's been such a great opportunity to make a place where people can just accept that they're humans and that however you're showing up is part of your journey and you're learning about yourself in the process as much as it is about the wealth that you're creating or the people that you're serving or the right strategy or the right tactics. That I think the real value in it is who we become in the process of building a business. So if today lands with you, make sure that you follow or subscribe because we put these episodes out every single week and we want you to know when the next episode drops. So I had asked you when we were preparing for our mindful moment, what is something that irritates you so much about what people think about mindfulness? And so that was the inspiration for today's episode, was really digging into those aspects of it. I think mindfulness has become much more popular. For my birthday, I got a mindfulness. It's called a Her Vibe journal. It is this most beautiful 13-week journal, journey of mindfulness and rooted in mindfulness. And so I haven't started it yet, but I'm super excited to kick that off. I think I'm going to spend my birthday. That's going to be one of the things I gift myself on my birthday, is just a free day of just being in my journal while the kids are off at school and Neil's at work. And I think it feels like the right time to do that. So I love that you are just saying and owning mindfulness as your thing and being the most true version of you. I kind of wonder if you had always done this, in your experience, it would close doors. But have you ever had that friend that's so kind of quirky and off the wall, but you love to be around them and you just know, whatever they're up for, you're in for it? I wonder if you really just let yourself be that person, if the right people would have followed you. How much of that was in your mind that you couldn't be that person? I'm just curious.
No, I think there's definitely some relevance there. What I learned from direct experience was that, especially in the corporate world, now working with individuals, working with small groups, it's a little bit different because you can get to that sort of personal connection, that energetic connection much quicker. But often in the corporate world, you're initially dealing with kind of gatekeepers, and some of their ways of evaluating or processing are kind of scripted. So it's almost like you had to say the magic words to get them to even look at your proposal, to even get a meeting with the hiring whoever, or So what I did find was often I sort of subverted some of the way I would use language or the way I would describe things until I got into the kind of inner circle. And then it would become more free. But the other reality, I just started thinking about this when I was preparing for this a while back, because this area was just not talked about outside of certain clinicians in mental health, Buddhist monks, certain types of meditative practices, or certain areas in the wellness world. It just wasn't part of general nomenclature. I think that's the word. General language. It just wasn't part of the general language. Now, mindfulness, the word mindfulness, and I did this check last night just to make sure this was still accurate. It's in the top 3 most searched terms in the wellness world. Anything that's mental health related, you can apply that to corporate setting as well. Like if it's under business, like business practices for a healthy business or practices for a healthy workplace, mindfulness will be 1 or 2. So that's new.
Do you think that's pop culture or evolution?
A little bit of both, but it is definitely the way that any sort of definition or terminology spreads like wildfire is related to social media mostly. It becomes a thing on TikTok and then everybody's saying it. They may be saying it wrong, which is where I'm going next with this, but it's out there. So that's when I started really thinking about the shift of my company. It's like, how do I leverage that in a very healthy and positive way? Because it's out there. So if that means I have to do some correcting and some educating, I've been doing that anyway. But now I can call it what it is. Like you said, step into that authenticity.
Yeah.
Identity and authenticity.
Yeah. Okay. So what irritates you? And you guys who know Jonathan, you're like, oh, he's so amazing. He's so this. I'm like, he has a streak to him that like when something irritates him, he will like crawl over a table to get out of a restaurant and go be by himself. Like, just gonna say. So
you don't know me.
So if you were to say like the thing that just grates on your nerves about what people think about mindfulness or a misconception about mindfulness, what is it?
Well, there's a long list, but I would say that this sort of combining a few things is when mindfulness is used, and this is especially true in corporate settings now, where it has become a tool that's in some way to give you an edge or to put you over someone else or to raise the value of you as a person or you as a company in some way.
Okay. What does that look like? Because I'm really curious about that.
There is a company, and I won't call them by name, that has a mindful program in place right now that's teaching their middle level managers up through executives how to motivate their employees in a mindful way. Well, what is actually teaching is a form of manipulation that feigns compassion in order to connect with a person in a way that they feel like they're being taken care of. And you have to go through some layers of the training to get to that. But there's nothing in there about genuine connection. There's nothing in there truly about compassion operating from a standpoint of who that person is and what they bring to the table. It's all about bottom line. So how do we make sure that this person stays long enough that they basically at least paid us back for their training? And all these things are actually written into the brief for the people that are disseminating this training.
Here's my question on that. Is the mindfulness appropriate, but the intention is icky?
Well, it leaves out core tenets of mindfulness that, in my mind, from my standpoint, it's no longer a mindful approach when you take away the core tenets.
What are the core tenets that are missing?
The 2 primary ones are the alignment with values and compassion.
Okay.
So those are the 2, and there's a longer list than that, but those are the 2 that you see so often in corporate settings completely removed. It has nothing to do with core values. It has to do with financial values of that particular work group or that particular company.
Mm-hmm.
And the sad part is, and there's good research behind this, if you're looking at economic indicators let's say within a company, but you could put this in society as well, but economic indicators within a company, attrition, loss of employees, and retraining of employees is a huge cost center for most companies. So in companies where true mindful approaches and practices have been implemented, and where a wellness model of balanced living is part of the corporate culture, across the board, those companies that have truly incorporated that into their culture, they are much more financially stable from a standpoint of especially those two indicators of attrition, keeping employees in place for longer and no need for retraining. So
that makes me think of, and I wonder, I'm curious, and maybe you don't have the answer on that, but it makes me think of a talk that Jen and I had, I don't know how long ago, the months are running together, but talking about building a healthy, sustainable business that maybe grows slower, but maybe prioritizes true mindfulness versus a company that's prioritizing fast growth, high volume growth, and it's not really growing something that's very stable. It is maybe not growing some deeper roots, but it's got some unhealthy practices in it. But you're like I'm thinking of like throwing fertilizer on like the inappropriate fertilizer. It kind of helps, but at some point it's kind of like burning up the roots and the leaves and it's not quite.
There's an academician. He's written several books around different cognitive therapeutic approaches, but he also in mindfulness. But he talks about this whole corporate culture thing and how we as practitioners need to counter this. He calls it McMindfulness, like McDonald's McMindfulness. And McMindfulness basically strips mindfulness, true mindfulness, from all of its ethical roots. So you're taking away compassion, you're taking away interdependence, you're taking away intention, and it's all repurposed to serve a particular institution's goals, whether it's financial goals or hiring goals or takeover goals or whatever it is. I've been getting those kind of inquiries as a consultant for years where we're merging with this company. So we want you to come in and evaluate our corporate culture from a standpoint of how do we best serve our employees? Okay, that's how it's put out. But then what it is, how do we spend as little amount of money as possible and keep the people that need to stay in place? So that's counter mindfulness. That's McMindfulness.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, best serve the employees.
Got it.
No, that's not what you're trying to do.
Got it. Okay. So now then, really what I'm hearing is like the irritation is the intention for the use of the tool. Like, yes. I hate when people are using this beautiful tool and practice for, my brain goes to impure things, but like for manipulation.
Yes. And it goes across the board too, because there's a woman I know she's on her big platform is TikTok, which I'm not on. So I haven't seen it on there, but I've seen some of her stuff carries over to Instagram, and she sells a toolkit, a mindful toolkit. And that's how I first looked her up, or somebody sent it to me or something, that cures depression. That's how it's framed. First of all, she's not a clinician in any way, shape, or form. And as far as I can tell, she has no actual even coaching, training, certification, anything. But she is selling mindfulness as a cure to depression. And she talks about it instant, like with this easy practice, you instantly become more calm. You instantly become more peaceful. You instantly become more balanced. And with daily practice and enrollment in my $1,000 class or whatever, you will cure your depression. Not only is that completely inaccurate in terms of what mindful is and what mindfulness does, it's dangerous. It's horribly dangerous and illegal. But she's one of probably hundreds.
Yeah.
And that's the double-edged sword of anything, any subject like this that becomes, like you mentioned, you said pop culture earlier. When it becomes pop culture, there's some benefit to that for somebody like me that wants to educate, that wants to teach, that wants to bring this into practice, and especially in the workplace. But the other side is you've got all these bozos that are trying to exploit others and exploit the practice in a way that's harmful and greed driven and all the things that mindfulness is not.
So curious, super interesting judgment that you just made.
Repeat it back to me. Reflect it back to me.
Well, so I'm curious, like you said, there's all these bozos out there to make money. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, like, yes. And it's clearly something that's a frustration for you. And so.
Yes. And that is, yes, that is definitely emotionally fueled in terms of how I presented that, but it's also fact. Like you could get on TikTok right now and find a dozen completely unqualified people from an actual standpoint of training, experience, and application, and listen to their message, and it's exactly that. Mm-hmm. Now, the judgment of that they're bad people, bad are trying to inflict bad things, is taking it a few additional steps. Now, I have to admit that in my mind, that's the layer I put on most of those people. But I have actually taken the time, like this woman I'm describing, to dig into what she's presenting, how she's presenting it, what her background is. Because it also fascinates me from a very mindful place of curiosity. It fascinates me that people can take something that hasn't been really disingrained in pop culture that long. I'm going to say it's really started in COVID, because people were looking for tools to help them get through a very altered reality that we had during COVID. And this was one of the tools that folks came upon. And it took on, like I said, social media helped perpetuate a lot of myth and stereotype around this subject area. And it has only grown from there in ways of how do we monetize this? Yeah. So.
Well, and what I wanted to point out too, though, is that you're promoting mindfulness, which it doesn't mean there's like, how do I want to say this, Jonathan? It's a practice.
Yeah.
Right. And it's being aware. But also, I think there's a misconception that people who are mindful don't like everything's Zen.
That's actually one of the myths that I have on my list.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm like in real time. Like I'm experiencing you like have an emotional reaction. Very clearly, this is a frustration for you because it matters. It matters to you and you care so deeply about humanity and wanting to alleviate that suffering. And when you see unqualified people, hey, there's nothing wrong with making money in business, but do it from a place of integrity where you're qualified and you've like done the work and you're being responsible with your claims.
Yes.
And you're frustrated because you care. And so this idea, like mindfulness also does not mean like I'm like this Zen sort of.
And in fact, that's actually a good segue into something I wanted to make sure to bring up and that I was getting off track from. Mindfulness in and of itself has nothing curative about it. It's not a cure for depression. It's not a cure for anger. It's not a cure for anything. It's a process and a pathway for insight and for practicing skills similar to cognitive behavioral therapy. We're practicing skills to be able to manage thought process and manage responses to thoughts and feelings that can help us adjust behavior, that can then help us adjust outcomes. So that's what it is. And then you layer in some very important pieces that kind of separate it from other clinical modalities, at least, of compassion and value awareness and value alignment. And the idea that we're all sharing, that suffering is a common thing that we all share. You put those into part of that practice. So in some ways, mindfulness can actually it does make you more aware, which can make you even angrier or more uncomfortable. I will completely admit that there are times where I have that thought of, maybe I'm practicing this too much. I would rather not know. It's almost like ignorance is bliss, even though that is absolutely not true. I'm not that person. I have some sort of innate drive to know, try and figure out, as I know you can relate to. But my point is, mindfulness is not going to make you more comfortable, especially in the short term. What it does do, and I can say this from just our experience, what we just were talking about a while ago, is for me personally, I have gotten to a place where I get from angry and pissed off or frustrated to a place of introspection and curiosity much quicker. I'm talking in a lot of instances, moments compared to months.
Well, we just witnessed it.
Yeah, exactly. Live in real time, right here. You saw it all.
Right? So it does. And the more you practice it, the faster you get at it. And okay, so I do want to ask, mindfulness versus the other thing that a lot of people talk about now is nervous system regulation. And the relationship between them, it's not the same thing.
It is part of the equation to getting to better nervous system regulation. It's a tool in that process. It's used along with, so mindfulness in and of itself isn't meditation, but mindful meditation is a practice of a tool that helps us with better nervous system regulation, neuroregulation, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it's one of many tools we have at our disposal. That is a practice of mindfulness. What mindfulness, when I talk about it, when I just use the word kind of globally, it is because it's a global way of living as well. But you have to practice the skills of mindfulness to get to a better place of balanced living or mindful living. So,
okay. So if you were to kind of describe mindfulness and what mindful living looks like, paint the picture for me.
Mindfulness, or the practice of mindful living, is a daily and sometimes moment by moment attempt to perceive the world through eyes that don't immediately judge, that stay curious, that stay in alignment with who you are as a person, and stay in a place of compassion for self and for others. And that's definitely not always easy to do.
Is there an element of presence, like the present moment, or not?
Absolutely, because it's impossible to stay bias-free and curious without staying present. So being in the moment means, like our interchange just a while ago, getting to that place of, okay, here's what just happened. Where's that coming from? What am I going to do about it? So staying in that place of internal and external reflection. And if you want to say there's an ultimate goal, there is no mindfulness mastery. It's always a process and a place of learning. But getting to that place of where it is almost instantaneous, where you're just, like taking a breath, it becomes more of an unconscious than a conscious approach.
So when you think of people who help others with mindfulness, who teach mindfulness like you, like people that you respect, we were talking a little while ago about this concept of like master, right? So like the masters of different things. Would you say that exists? Mastery of mindfulness?
I would say that, and I had a Buddhist monk actually say this to me one time. So there is no such thing as a master. We are all students. And the practice toward mastery is where the learning occurs. So we have it because a lot of people they put an endpoint for everything. We want to call it a goal, whatever it is. We talked about this in a different episode, but that really is self-limiting when you put an identifiable endpoint to something that's as global and far-reaching as something like mindfulness. So the whole point, or the whole intention that we will help us if we carry, is that we do the practice, that we do the work. And that means doing what you can do in any given moment at any given time. And sometimes that is nothing. So, yeah, I think that's the biggest message to get across is mindfulness is about the doing and what you can do in any given moment. So
that's interesting. Mindfulness is about the doing. Huh. Because I talk about be, do, have, right? So who you be, what you do, the way you do, like the way you do it, the choices that you make, right? I'd never really heard it put that way. And I also find it fascinating that mindfulness oftentimes gets classified into the woo category, like that. And I was like, it's so not though.
And that's one of my pet peeve areas too, is because misconception is the quickest path to discounting something.
Yeah.
So somebody that says, well, the practice of mindfulness is not for me because that's like crystals and other frou-frou stuff, which I'm not gonna poo-poo any of it. I'm not gonna say this is my mindful take on that is, hey, if it's helping you, and you see that as positive and productive, go for it. But it's not spiritualism. It's not a religion. It's not any sort of woo-woo, whatchamacallit. Now you could have that as part of your practice for you to get into a place of self-reflection and a mind that can be reflective. Maybe you burn candles and you have your crystals around you, or you go through some mindful and deep breathing practices to get to a place of stillness enough to be able to look inside. Whatever that is.
You could put whatever context around it you want. Deep breathing, scientifically, deep breathing actually stimulates different parts of the brain and activates the word, like, I'm not even going to know what BDNF is, but I know BDNF does something. And that is what my DNA person told me I need to do is deep breathe because it's going to do some chemical reaction in my brain. Like we can take it to the science level as well. You can do mindfulness in any context of your belief system.
Yes. And that's the other piece that bugs me about some of these systems that people are putting in place is it's sort of like a one size fits all. Like here's the cookie cutter formula to becoming mindful. There's no such thing because what works for somebody, one person might not be effective at all. Like I'm not great at sitting still and breathing for an hour, but I can walk in the woods for an hour and find myself again. That's my mindful meditation, is a walk in the trees. And other people, they're walking the trees and all they think about are ticks and snakes. So it's not going to be a place for them to be finding their center and finding a place to where they can self-reflect and find their compassionate roots and those things that are important to this balance.
It sounds a lot like getting in your body, connecting to how you feel, and being in neutral about it, and then making a choice.
Yes. Yes. You could kind of look at that as that's one of the tools for becoming more mindfully aware and then maybe that's a good way to start toward wrapping this conversation up is find some practical tools that you just start practicing. And what you're going to find is there becomes connection from one thing to the next. So maybe practicing 3 minutes of deep breathing every day, but from a standpoint where you become more and more aware of how you breathe and what affects your breathing, what thoughts come in when you breathe in, what thoughts come in when you breathe out, that level of raising awareness, or practicing body scanning when you go to bed at night take 5 minutes and scan how you're feeling, physically feeling. Scan what thinking about that physical feeling brings up for you emotionally or mentally. Oh, man, it sucks getting old. Oh man, whatever it is, those things. 5 minutes of that. Just practicing that becomes awareness. And science geeky thing too, as part of this. There's a new study that just came out that have been monitoring these folks that have been practicing different areas of mindfulness for a 5-year following. And they had physical changes to the prefrontal cortex of their brains. Their prefrontal cortex have become thicker, which means from the way that our brains work, they have better focus, they have better emotional regulation, and they tend to be balanced their entire brains, better brain-body balance overall. Across the board, the people that practiced in these sort of systemic ways that were patterned for them personally had these biophysical changes. So I thought that was kind of cool.
It's a hugely overlooked practice and I just think if we all had more awareness of ourselves and others and less judgment and more compassion for ourselves and others, how much that would heal so much of the world. And it needs healing so badly right now. What I took away from this conversation is that there's a lot of benefits to making mindfulness, whatever that looks like for you, part of your daily life, that it is not nearly as complex. When I say complex, like it's very accessible to anybody, regardless of financial status or situation or circumstance, that it's accessible if you choose it. And that there's a lot of resources out there available, and to be very careful who influences your mind and make sure that you vet people who you choose to follow.
Yes. So, we have an episode on mindfulness and what mindfulness is. I wish I had looked up the episode number, but I didn't.
I'll link it in the show notes.
Okay. And so for those of you that this is your kind of an introduction to this subject, I would suggest that you go back and listen to that episode. And then we can probably figure out a way to, if you're more interested in a reading list or in some tools to help with this. But one of the things that you just said struck a thought in me, and it's mindfulness has been framed as a way of escape or avoidance in some form or fashion. And it's actually just the opposite. Mindfulness is about showing up, but showing up in a fully you, authentic way that has more intentionality behind what you do and how you do it, and more compassion behind what you do and how you do it. So
awesome. Thank you. And we'll make sure that is the website up yet? Mindful Rising yet?
It is not.
Okay. So when it's up.
It points to my old website, but it will be, but we'll make an official announcement when it's up.
When it's up. So, and a lot of those resources will be there. I guess that's motivation for you to get it going there. There is nothing like accountability when you just make a public announcement, because then you're like held to it. That's one of my strategies to create the dopamine that I need to get stuff done, is just publicly announce it.
It's so true.
All right. Well, with all of that being said, I'm sending you so much love.
Be well, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Edge podcast. Make sure you subscribe and take a moment to be kind and share this episode with someone you care about. Leave a review to help us bring more compassionate leaders building businesses and creating wealth to the table. And for show notes, head over to consciousedge.com/podcast. This podcast and the linked materials are presented solely for general information, educational, and entertainment purposes, and should not be taken as personal or medical advice or any kind of mental health treatment. Please consult a medical or mental health professional if you feel you need such services. Please be advised that all investing and entrepreneurial endeavors involve risk, and the use of the education and information on this podcast and linked materials is at the user's own risk.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.